Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Amy Fiore. I am the director of the Nonprofit Help Desk. It is such a pleasure to have such a large group, an enthusiastic group joining us for our session From Logo to Legacy, Building Your Brand Identity today. Kirsten, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, I'm just going to very briefly tell everyone about the Nonprofit Help Desk. I'll wait for you to there it is. For anyone who is unfamiliar or brand new to us, the Nonprofit Help Desk is a program of the JCC of Greater Coney Island. We offer free live workshops just like this one, and also a series of work. And these are capacity building workshops on a variety of different topics that affect and help nonprofit organizations. We also offer a specific series of workshops that are focused on discretionary funding from New York City Council. We have a number of those coming up over the next 6 weeks or so. So be sure to check out what we have going on. We on our website at nphd.org have an archive of past workshops as well, a LinkedIn community that we invite you to join us for, and free expert one-on-one support that is specifically earmarked for New York City-based nonprofit organizations that is funded by your New York City Council. Some of our workshops are also generously funded by Sobel Bixel Consulting for nonprofits. And we truly are a help desk. So if you are a New York City nonprofit, if you are looking for free one-on-one help in the same way that you might go to your Geek Squad, you have a really specific question that you're hoping can get answered, you need an expert to kick around an idea for an hour or two, fill out the form at the nphd.org, and we'll be happy to take a look at that. And if we have an expert to pair you with, we will certainly do so. Without any further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Kirsten, who is going to talk to you about branding today. Kirsten, I'll let you introduce yourself because you'll do a better job than I will. I turn it over to you. Thanks so much.
Hey, hi, my name is Kirsten Dean. I am a graphic designer. Work with nonprofits, NGOs, and mission-driven organizations. So I also do C4 work with political PACs that are mission-driven or at least align with my personal values. I have been doing this for over 20 years. So I've gotten pretty good at it, and I'm pretty excited to bring all this information that I've gathered to you so that you do not have to spend a lot of time doing all the research. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. When you hear the term branding, most people think, oh, that's doing a logo design. It's a logo, right? That's a logo. And that's actually not what branding is. Branding is a big, comprehensive term, and it's really about perception. It's about how people are perceiving your organization. So this can be a lot of different stakeholders, right? We've got activists, we've got the media, government, change makers, grantees, grantors, coalition members if you're part of a coalition, donors, staff, really everybody, but it's how people think about you. So your logo is only just one tiny piece of this big puzzle. So to get a little bit deeper into what that means, and don't worry, I will not read you this entire slide. There's kind of two different ways to look at branding. One is from the business side, right? And when I say business, I recognize that we're nonprofits, but we're kind of structured in a way that we are client facing, right? And so in general, the idea here is, what do the clients or the customers think about the voice, marketing, promotions, and presence of your organization? So I put an example here of the Red Cross, and I'm showing you the logo, even though I told you branding is not a logo is part of it. And I put their mission statement so that you can see that both of these elements really speak to the same kind of brand. Right? So if I look at the logo, I get the idea of emergency, unbiased response, And it's very, it's kind of a chunky logo. It feels very trustworthy and like it has a level of authority. It's not thin with like little line weight and lots of different complicated elements. It's really to the point. And then if you read their mission statement, you can see how they're tying in their own values back into their logo design. So now when I shift over to the other side, which is really thinking about it not from their perspective, but from our perspective, right? Users of the organization, how do we feel about the brand? And when we think about the Red Cross, we automatically, I mean, I hope you guys do, but I have an innate sense of trust. I feel like if I'm going to donate money to the Red Cross, I know the money is going to go somewhere. I know they're responding to urgent disasters and situations, and I know that they save lives. And so all of the materials that they put out, whether it is their mission statement, their logo, or a promo graphic like the one you see here, they're all in service of this same kind of approach. And if you look even at the picture here, what you'll notice is that in general, it's pictures of people who are smiling, helping, things like that. Because what they don't want to do, and this would be where you're going away from a brand, would be showing pictures of disaster situations or horrible things. What they want to give is a positive element or a positive feeling to the work that they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, which is about brand personality and voice and tone. I'm gonna get my. So we know that branding is about creating these feelings. How do we do that? That's where the logo comes in, but that's only one piece. So one part of creating a brand is really creating a name that speaks to who you are and what you do. So most of you probably already have a name for your organization, but if you don't, or you're thinking about going through a rebrand, your name has a lot of different ways you can approach it. You can do a name that is descriptive, right? It tells you what they do. It can be aspirational, which gives you kind of a feeling. Think Live Strong. Or common cause. And so that's the first thing is your identity, your name. Then we want to talk about messaging, and we're gonna get into messaging in a little bit more detail. But messaging is really the materials that you put out, the words, the narratives that you put out to the public. And in this messaging, you want to breed trust, value, strategy, and you do it through marketing. So while marketing may feel sometimes a little icky or weird, it is a key part of presenting who you are to the world. And we will talk about some different strategies for how to do that as we go through the presentation. And part of that marketing is, of course, creating a visual package. So I'm a graphic designer by trade, so this is what I do. But I also, because now as designers, we have to wear a lot of hats, right? So while yes, I can design you a logo and I can tell you the colors you're going to use and the fonts and the photos and the motifs, that all really has to come together through a cohesive sense of messaging, right? So all these comms materials have to relate to each other and have to speak to each other. Not only that, but we have to do this through repetition and consistency. And this can be the part that gets a little tricky. It seems logical that you would say the same thing over and over, and that your message should be consistent and your visuals should be consistent. But often what happens is when you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, things can get diluted a bit. You can have certain people who are running off making a PowerPoint presentation that looks nothing like a presentation that you showed a grantee a couple weeks ago. That's where things are where your brand is starting to fall apart. You really want everything to have a polished, consistent look. It's not to say that you have to spend $1 billion to put this all together. You really do not. It's just about showcasing a professional level where all of these elements are working together. And the repetition component is really about a way to get that brand feeling in people's mind, right? If I see that Red Cross logo over and over and over, I don't even need to see the words Red Cross anymore, right? I mean, it's literally a Red Cross, but also I know when I see that, what that means. I automatically, if I were, for example, in a disaster situation, I would feel safe if I saw somebody wearing a Red Cross on their hat. So we breed these feelings through design, through marketing, and through advertising. And when we do it, there's kind of a process. There's a secret sauce to all of this. And it starts with research. So we know that logos are not the brand, but logos are part of the brand, right? So logos take a few days or weeks to design, but building a brand identity takes a long time because it is not just about the visuals, but it's also about the messaging and it's also about strategy. So when you're starting to think about what your brand is and who you are and what you want to be and how you want to sell yourself to the world, you start with the most logical place, right? Where you start doing research. You're going to identify your target audience. Who are the people that I am trying to reach? In some cases, these will be constituents or the people that you help or whatever, right? If I'm an environmental organization, it might be that I am talking to park rangers or people who go hiking, right? Those might be end users, but my audience is also going to be donors, members, the staff, whatever else. On top of that, I need to figure out who is my competition. And we don't like to use the word competition in nonprofits because we think of ourselves as all kind of working together. But in general, when we're an organization that does something, there are probably other organizations doing the same thing or similar things. So don't let that experience keep you down. What you want to do is see what they're doing that's working well, and then borrow some of those ideas. But on top of it, you want to do a unique selling proposition, which this is going to help you write what's called a brand story. And your unique selling proposition is where you're looking at all of your competitors and you're saying, what do I do that's different? What makes our organization different from that? Right? So if I'm Doctors Without Borders, how am I different from the Red Cross? Right? And you start to hone in on those elements, and that's going to help you figure out how to write a brand story. So once you've done your research, you have to start thinking about that messaging. You're going to simply define your brand's purpose and position. This isn't your organization's purpose and position. This is really about the brand. What is the message that you want people to have? And then in crafting that message, you are going to develop a personality and a brand voice. And this brand voice is how you create a brand story. And so I mentioned the USP, your unique selling proposition, which is what makes me unique. Why should people trust me, fund me, use me? Why should my organization be special? And it's going to take a little time to sort of tease out what that unique element is. But that becomes kind of the kernel of your brand. Then on top of that, you want to think about a brand personality. So this is a little tricky because we have to kind of think of our organization as if it were a human. What kind of personality would they have? Are they fun, serious, modern, trusted, caring, warm, silly, goofy, very professional, whatever that is? Think of 5 words, write those words down, and every piece of communication material that you put out, you want to ask yourself, is it meeting one of these 5 words? Am I actually reflecting the personality that I want my organization to have? Right? So if I'll just go back to the Red Cross again. If I'm the Red Cross, I am trusted, I am respected. I am not an organization that deals with the arts, right? So I'm not going to have a personality that feels like that. My personality is going to be very serious, right? Whereas if I'm an educational arts organization, I might have a more fun, approachable, warm personality, because that is a different kind of feeling that I want to evoke in people. So once you've got your kind of brand story, you've figured out what makes you special and unique, you would pick an appropriate name. And again, whether most people already kind of have a name in mind, but sometimes it can be tricky if, for example, your name is reflective of your founder or some sort of historical element. Like think of the Susan Komen for The Cure, Race for the Cure. Most people, I think if you were to trickle down to Gen Z, they probably don't know who Susan J. Komen is, but you add on Race for the Cure, you brand it with all of the pink ribbons and the race and a lot of repetition and consistency, and people start to figure out who that is and know that story. And then they can go to your website and really learn about Susan herself. Then on top of that, the next thing is you write a slogan or a tagline. This can be so difficult because trying to sum up what you do in 5 or 6 words is challenging, but this is where AI is actually your helpful friend. Do not be afraid to use the tools that are available to you. I absolutely think that putting some keywords into ChatGPT and asking for a bunch of slogans, you will be surprised at how efficient some of those come out. And then once you've kind of got that narrative structure pulled together, that's when you're going to start to explore your visuals. You'll have a new logo and an overall brand look, right? Once you have that overall brand, then you integrate that into your business or your organization, or you deploy it out. So if I've already got my logo and I know that and my colors and my typefaces, and I've got a Canva account set up, I should be ready to deploy my social media in a way that tells the story that I'm trying to tell. So we're going to start a little bit with messaging. So think of this more as your verbal or your narrative component to branding. And this is why I wanted to start here and not with the visuals, because I think most people, again, when they hear branding, they think, oh, it's a logo. But it really isn't. This is the heart of your brand, which is telling the story of who you are, what you do, why you do it, and how you do it better than others. And when it's done right, this is how you educate and activate. And those are our ultimate goals, no matter what our organization is. We want to educate people about what we do, and we want to activate people to get involved. So here is what messaging is. It is a description of your work. It should be concise. It should be clear. It should be consistent. You can start with a say this, not that list. In general, I work also for a democracy organization, Common Cause, and we find that by doing this, it's helpful for putting together talking points. Because if you have a list that says say this, not that, you're already controlling the narrative. And that's very helpful if you're doing press work or really putting together any kind of comms materials. And in doing that, you want to create some talking points, messaging guidance, and this is the foundation for your elevator pitches, your slogans, etc. And again, I really think this is where AI can be helpful for you. As long as you have some kind of base language to put this around, you can have AI sort of help and shape what that looks like, especially if English isn't your native language. This is a really good way to kind of tighten up some of those thoughts. It sounds crazy, but you want to really pay attention to using correct grammar, correct editorial style, and really proofread every piece of communication that goes out. Trust me, all it takes is one typo for one troll to just totally hijack your social media and ruin everything. Or one typo to change a piece of information in a way that you didn't mean to. Or people to start to not take you seriously. So it's really important that all of your materials, that you look them over, proof them. In general, if you have another set of eyes, I like to have somebody else look at everything before I send it out. And you want everything to be formatted. So it should look professional, but things can still look professional without them looking so slick and corporate that people will think you're an organization that's heavily funded. There is a sweet spot in there where you can still look grassroots and sound grassroots, but you can also present yourself as professionals who really are experts in whatever your field is. And then again, as I've said over and over, consistency, 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 repetition, repetition, repetition. Repeating your message, showing the same look, saying the same things makes people remember who you are and what you do. It can feel a little boring sometimes. You might say, oh, I don't want to use blue because that's our logo color and I'm so tired of it. It doesn't matter if you're tired of it. What matters is projecting the same calm look over and over again, because people will begin to identify your organization with a certain look and message. So where will you find all of this great messaging? If you're doing it correctly, you should see it everywhere. All of your comms message, all of your comms work should be rooted in branded messaging. That means, and this can be tricky, we can understand it from printed collateral, right? One sheets, brochures, trade graphics, posters. Sure, we can control the message because it's a slower process. But it should also be true with your digital communications, the emails you send out, the social media you deploy, your website. All of that material should still feel rooted in your brand. And then the really challenging one, which is to keep yourself on brand in person, whether that's being interviewed by the media, participating in a webinar, talking at an event or a panel, or giving congressional testimony. Again, you want to make sure that you are on top of the same message you've been giving over and over. It's easier when you're a smaller organization because you can control the narrative a little bit more. As your organization begins to grow, it gets a little harder because you are not everyone and everything. You will have employees who will go out and do some of this messaging, and you want to make sure that all of you are on the same page. So this is sort of an aside about voice versus tone. When you are sending out messages, you want to be consistent in your voice, meaning that the overall brand messaging is the same, right? So I'm going to use Common Cause because that's an organization I work for. Our voice is trusted, inclusive, and steadfast. Every single piece of communication material we put out, whether it's printed, digital, or our CEO going to be interviewed by MSNBC, we make sure that voice is consistent, right? Always on message about democracy, about the importance of it. Tone is dynamic. Dynamic means that it's changing, adaptable. Tone should be adaptable for different media, right? So if I am testifying in front of Congress, that's going to be a very different tone than if I am making an explainer TikTok. These are not the same audiences, but the voice should be constant, meaning the message that I'm giving is exactly the same. It's just that the way I'm going to approach it is going to be more informal if I'm making a TikTok explainer video than if I'm giving testimony in front of Congress or writing a letter to the governor. So in keeping with that, I put together an example that our organization, an example of our organization. So after the election, people, as they're watching it, they immediately come to conclusions that this person won and this person lost. But our message is always consistently, election day is not results day. And that is because it takes time to count ballots. There are absentee ballots. The results don't all come in at the same time. A lot of them have to be hand counted, et cetera, et cetera. So the basic message you can see there is election day is not results day. Our system is working to count every eligible vote correctly and efficiently. This does not mean there's a problem, and we cannot allow election deniers to call foul and cast doubt on a system that is working exactly as it should. That's the core message. And when you look below, there's another way to say the same thing. But essentially what we're trying to do is say, hang on, chill out, relax. There isn't a problem. We're assuaging people's fears and we're telling them this is exactly the way it should work. And how does that look in different formats? Well, first we have an email up at the top left there. And this is, and everything that's highlighted is our same message, but showing it in a different way. So in the email, it's a longer format. It's a more personal tone. It always has a little bit more of an urgency, especially because there's usually a donation ask at the end. We have a little bit more flexibility with how much messaging we can put together. And then we've got a quote from one of our directors from AP News, right? And she is on message, meaning saying the same thing about election day is not results day, and that we need to trust the process. But you can see she says it in a different way. We have never certified an election on election night. Same message, right? Trust the process, wait, everybody relax. And then we look down here where we've got another quote from a different executive director, and same message, just some different language. And then you can look over on the left and we've got a video from X. And if you look at that, it's a much quicker, more concise way of saying the same thing. Because when we're on social media, we have less time. People are scrolling quickly. They are maybe watching part of your video, maybe not even, maybe they have the sound off. And so you want to make sure that you're giving the same message. So all the branding is consistent, but you are using a different dynamic tone depending on what that medium is. So what happens if you go off message or somebody goes rogue in your organization? What happens? Well, first you're going to get confusion. Well, I don't know. That's not how they talked about this before. It's going to create a loss of credibility or trust. Oh, really? I didn't know that. It's going to create doubt. Maybe they aren't as aligned as I thought, or misrepresentation. And this is a real problem in today's media siloed society, which is grabbing little pieces and cherry picking quotes to fit a certain agenda. And then alienation. This is the ultimate no-no, which is, I know them to be this, but that's not what I'm seeing right now. Unsubscribe, unfollow, remove me from the call list. And this is the greatest fear of every organization, right? Is that no longer people want to receive your emails, no longer are they interested in what you're doing. And the chances are that if they're at any of these levels, they're also going to probably discuss that with other people. So you really want to stay on task, on message, and make sure everyone in the organization is following whatever those talking points are. So now we get to my area of expertise, the visuals, because it's a two-part process, right? There's the messaging part, which is the narrative component, and then there's the visual part. And does it matter? A lot of people say, oh, who cares? Like, that's just smoke and mirrors. It does count. It does matter, especially today. I think we all know that most people are living on their screens, living on their phones. We are an extremely visually aware society now. And so we have to make sure that our organization lives up to those standards, or it's not going to look professional. It's going to look amateur, and people are not going to pay attention. They're not going to listen to you, and they're not going to give you their money. So you might remember that graphic. What is a brand over there? I just wanted to kind of reiterate the logo versus brand conversation. So the logo is really a visual, quick symbol. It should be easily recognizable, reproducible. When I say reproducible, I mean that in two ways. One is that it should be so simple that you can make it all one color. That's a really important component, especially now, because sometimes these layer over graphics. You also want it to be simple so that people remember it. But also, I have this so I teach logo design at Seton Hall, and one thing that I tell students is you should be able to like show somebody a logo, they should walk out of a room and then kind of be able to redraw it. If they can redraw it, then you've created something simple and memorable enough. Does it have to be perfect? No, but like if you knew it was a panda for the World Wildlife Fund, then you'd be able to kind of draw a rough panda. A logo does not have to magically communicate everything a brand stands for. It can't. It is a visual symbol. So think of it more as a tool for identification. It's a shorthand for who your organization is, right? Whereas the brand is everything. It's the whole experience. And that is all of the time, whether it's visual, narrative, all of these components pulled together. So I like to show this graphic about a logo versus a brand. We all know who McDonald's is. If I look at the left, that's the logo. But if I look at the right, that's the visual brand. And the visual brand is not just about the logo, it's that you see this red everywhere. You see red and yellow over and over again. You see a very similar aesthetic with all of the designs. They are simple, flat, with just red and yellow. Even the language on the ads is very similar. You can see the app is very similar. Even the interior of the stores have a feeling that brings you back to this brand. So if you're trying to kind of wrap your mind around what is a brand, think about Apple versus Best Buy. If I go into the Apple store, I know I'm in an Apple store. It feels Apple-y, for lack of a better word. There, everything is very clean and neat, and everything has clean lines, and there's blonde wood and this brushed aluminum everywhere. There's a sleekness, a coolness to it. The packages, when you get an iPhone, it opens up in this kind of way that feels like a gift. It's got a very beautiful, expensive box, and that all goes with the aesthetic. If I walk into a Best Buy, I do not feel like I am in an Apple store. It is an assault of products. It's very difficult to find people to help me. It's an entirely different brand experience. And at the same time, it's the same products. Like I can get a phone from any of these people. I can get a computer, but I value the experience more of going somewhere where that experience has been branded for me. And I would say McDonald's is a good example of creating an experience where you know you're there. When you are looking at a McDonald's ad, if I cover up the logo, you're not going to think it's a Wendy's ad or a Burger King ad. You know what McDonald's is, even if you didn't know that you know what McDonald's is. So when we get started with the logo process, it depends, you can hire somebody, you can try your hand at doing it yourself. I recommend hiring somebody. But in general, you want to start with the 5 qualities called SMART. And SMART stands for simple, memorable, appropriate, resizable, and timeless. So simple, I touched on that a little bit. Simple means that it's really quick, it's really easy, it's a thing that you might be able to draw even if you're not good at drawing. The simpler it is, the easier it's going to be to deploy in multiple formats. Memorable, it should be something that people can remember. right? So if I were to close this presentation and ask you all to draw the Target logo, I guarantee everyone here could do it. And then appropriate. I talked a little bit about Susan G. Komen for The Cure before, but I love this logo as an example of appropriate because we know that the big fundraising component is a race. So we've got this ribbon, which of course is the symbol for breast cancer, but also the ribbon is on the move. So it looks like it's running and a little human ribbon, and so it's appropriate to what they do. Resizable. It is extremely important that when you hire a logo designer or you are creating a logo design, that your logo come in multiple iterations. So you should be able to pull it apart. You should be able to make it work in horizontal and in vertical formats, and it should be legible at small sizes and big sizes. If you have something that has lots of little pieces or complicated elements, the minute you put it as your social media avatar, people are not going to know what it is. So the simpler it is, the easier it's going to be to recognize when it's at that 24 by 24 pixels. And then timeless. In an ideal world, you are only doing this one time. You are creating an identity and you hopefully can adapt it over time. So the Apple logo is a really good example of this. It's still the same core logo. It's just changed a little bit in its execution. So when we look at the original one from the 80s, it had these kind of like groovy stripes in it. And then in the 90s, there was that sort of slick, plasticky look on glossy look on everything. That was the beginning of when icons on your desktop had that kind of glossy look. And now we've moved into universal flat design because it works better with mobile devices. So you can take this same logo and you can adapt it for a variety of different styles that reflect the time. And I apologize for this slide because it has too many words on it, and it's what I tell every single one of my clients to not say so much, but here I am doing it. Part of the reason that I did this was I wanted to make sure that if you keep the presentation, that you have this kind of list here. So I just talked a little bit about the logo, but the logo is just one piece of the visual brand. The visual brand really is about crafting a visual identity across a variety of different platforms. So it starts with the logo, right, which we just talked about, the central emblem or symbol. Then we have color palettes. Those should be the same colors that you use over and over again. So think about that McDonald's, how it was red and yellow everywhere. Think about how if I were to say Target to you, you go into the store and the carts are red. Like, this is not an accident. They want you to associate colors with their brand. Coca-Cola is a great example of that. I always start my classes by asking people, what color is Coke? And they all say red. And I say, well, the drink is actually brown. The brand has become so embedded in people's mind that they actually think of the brand before the actual product itself. On top of color, you want to deal with typography. Typography is your choice of fonts and text styles. You want to be consistent with that. So whatever your typeface is, you should see that over and over and over again. It should not be Times New Roman. It should not be Arial. You want to have something that really becomes tied with your organization. Also in a visual identity package might be a package of icons. And there's lots of different kinds of icons, right? There, you might have a standard set that you use over and over for your pillars or your missions. If you are, a pillared organization, we value these 5 things. Those 5 icons should appear all the time in your messaging. And then what does that design look like? Are they filled in? Are they outline? Are they monochromatic? Are they 2-color? Are they multicolor? Whatever it is, you want to have a consistent look through all of the different pieces that you put together. And this kind of goes to the next element, which is motifs, photos, illustrations, graphic treatments. Think about how you're going to deploy a look and a feel. And this can be a little squishy, but I like to think of the ACLU as a good example. They have these kind of duotone photos with this engraving treatment that they use, and they use it on a lot of their materials. So whether it's print, social media, their website, you will see that all the photos have kind of a similar look and feel. Your collateral is part of the visual package, right? So this would be all the materials, the print materials that you put out. That can be marketing, it can be ads, your stationery system, even your like grant package. You want it to feel branded to your organization. If you have, for example, a signature photo, we call them hero photos, that should be deployed everywhere. I should start to see that photo and be like, oh yes, right, that organization. If applicable, packaging. You want your packaging to also reflect all of these things. Same typography, same colors, right? Again, like I mentioned before with the Apple phone, when you buy an iPhone, that box is part of the brand. It feels branded. There is a tactile experience with the paper, and then the white color, the same font that you see on their website and on their TV ads. It feels consistent. And then the environment itself, right? We talked about the Apple versus the Best Buy store. But think about if you have some sort of physical location, you want the signage and interior design to be reflective of that brand. This is probably a bigger step than where you are right now. Most of you are probably running these organizations from, a small office or from your home. But at some point, if you are out, for example, at a wellness fair, you would want to make sure that any signage or banners that you bring there, or tablecloths or brochures, really reflect that look and feel. And that leads to the final element, which is your visual style. This is where you have an actual set of guidelines that are set up for people to use. This is really, really helpful for when you bring on contractors who are going to design things for you, or you bring on new employees. This is so the brand stays consistent, and the human creating it in the background, no one knows or cares who it is. When I look at something that Target does, I am not going to know who the graphic designer was and that they love purple. At the end of the day, it's just going to look Target-y to me. And that's what you want. You want your materials to have that effect. So these can be spelled out in brand guidelines that are a PDF. They can be in a Google slide. But here's kind of I'm hoping you can see this. I think you can. This is an online visual guide, and I just wanted to I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I wanted to show you that it really reflects all of the things I just talked about, right? Who are we? What is our messaging? What is our personality? So that we're giving the same messaging to everybody. When they say open, radical, kind, here's their brand voice and tone. They are opinionated, right? That is a bold statement to make. And then we talk about the logo, how it's used, the parent brand, blah, 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 all the things you can and can't do with all the visuals. And you can see here's a series of icons that goes with it, the color palette, your typefaces, all of these materials. And then a series, and this is what I wanted to kind of show you here, which is the photo treatment and motif designs. So there's a series of sample illustrations and animations, which give you a sense of the brand. And if I show you this, you don't automatically think, oh, that's the Red Cross. It looks nothing like the Red Cross, right? It feels and looks like Firefox, and that is what it's supposed to. So if I were hired by Firefox to create a video, The first thing I would do is grab all these colors, grab all these typefaces. I would write down the messaging and the tone, and then I would make materials that look like this. So nobody would see Kirsten Dean's hand in it. They would just see that it looks Firefoxy. And here's more messaging. So I really like this because it's got messaging in all different capacities. Here you can see a hero image being reused to reinforce that brand, photography guidelines, etc., etc. Your fonts, all that good stuff.
Kirsten, I was so engaged. I didn't notice that it was 12:30 when I was supposed to remind you it was 12:30. So I'm just letting you know it is 12:45, and have just put a note in the chat that if anyone has questions, they should start putting them into the chat for you. But I don't want to interrupt you to take a few more minutes to finish up your notes, but we do want to open it up for questions in case anyone wants to share them.
Okay, that's good because I think I'm getting to the end here. So what's really important about a brand is that it makes you powerful. You are seen as powerful. So when I look at this Planned Parenthood materials on the left, this is their brand for their health services. It's blue, it's calm, it's trusting, it feels good, right? It feels relaxing. You know that you are going somewhere where people are going to take care of you. Then I look at their action fund. It's hot pink. It's aggressive. It's in your face. It says we won't back down. It's a different brand, same organization, two different series of message, and then series of consistent messaging within. So we start, your social media is always kind of your starting point of doing a consistent brand. And if you look at these organizations here, you can see just by looking at their grid, how their social media designs really reflect that look, right? We see Doctors Without Borders is all red and white and black. International Rescue Committee, upon first glance, yellow, black, same typography, and so on and so forth with the American Lung Association, Parkinson's Foundation, and Susan G. Komen. These really look like their own organizations. If you call up your own grid and everything looks crazy, that should tell you that I'm not using repetition and consistency. I'm not giving out a consistent brand message. So, like, here's a quick series of graphics for Common Cause. The idea behind consistency reinforcing this message is that you become the face of that messaging. So, for example, we want to be the face of democracy. And by showing over and over in social media the same look and feel, that translates back in people's minds as, oh yeah, they're the ones that do democracy work. And so we can do it in social media, but we can do it everywhere else too, right? Whether it's, this is a webinar graphic, this is the website, this is a flyer, these are t-shirts, these are rally signs, you are still getting the same look and feel, you are still getting the same messaging. So in summation, I made it. Logos take a few days or weeks. Building a brand identity takes time and strategy and forethought, because you can't just run out of the gate and do this. You really have to think about it. So you're going to start with that research. You're going to get your messaging tight and defined. And then you're going to bring in visuals that reinforce that messaging. And then you're going to rinse and repeat over and over again. Consistency, repetition, consistency, repetition. And your brand book, like the one I showed you from Firefox, those will help you keep things consistent. Integrating design will help you keep your messaging consistent. Creating talking points and messaging that you craft in different tones and voices, that will help with your messaging and keep you on brand. And that I did it. I
Kristen,
believe it's
thank you for a
12:50.
fantastic session. This is great. You have some questions in the chat, so let me shoot them at you. Denise is asking, what do you think the impact will be of the new ADA standards? We are a public agency, so we will have to comply by 2026.
Yeah, this is a really good question. It's really challenging. Um, it's really challenging because there are a lot of this has to do with low vision users, and making sure that you follow the WCAG guidelines, and also optimizing all of your PDF materials for low vision users. I think, personally, what I do is I actually have a consultant that I use to do a final check through on accessibility of materials. There are loads of things online where you can run your graphics through them to see that if they're accessible. What it is it just involves more time because you have to alt tag everything. You have to um, sometimes dig into the XML behind the scenes to appropriately tag documents so that they are optimized for screen readers. But I do think that as AI gets more and more robust, we will be able to offload some of these jobs to those kind of tools.
We're seeing it more and more. A lot of times on Microsoft products, on Adobe products, it will even bring something up on the screen. It might be small. You got to look for it that says, "Hey, this might not be as ADA compliant. It might not be as visible or welcoming as other things." So don't ignore those little flags that pop on your screen
No,
as well.
and it is hard to optimize document design for it. There's actually I've done there's a long, lengthy LinkedIn tutorial that is fantastic. If anybody has the LinkedIn Pro, you can. I did the whole thing, and it just means it's time consuming. That's what I would say. It's more time consuming. So if you are rushing things out, like social media is an ephemeral element, you can get away with more than you can with evergreen materials.
You have a question from Aaliyah saying, as a new communication manager who is new to this role, do you have any suggestions on classes or resources I should look into?
I definitely, like I just said, LinkedIn has some really good tutorials. I really recommend learning Canva and messing around with Canva. The great part about Canva for everyone here is that if you have a 501c designation, you can get a free pro account. You just have to write them, you have to show the documentation, and then you have access to everything. So that would be the first thing I would do. I think it's elements like this that are particularly helpful. Any sort of webinars you can attend, but there's two different sort of roads, right? Like there's the marketing and advertising and social media side, and then there's also the design side. And when you are running your own nonprofit or you're a comms, you have to wear a lot of hats. So I think learning Canva is helpful, and then I think writing as much as you can so you have documentation.
HES says our primary organization colors are blue and white, but we have multiple departments that use sub-brand colors. Do you have any best practices or tips on how to maintain consistency while incorporating these sub-brand colors? And also, this was great.
I do, but I'm gonna first preface this with you can lead a horse to water, but you can't always make them drink. And I know this from crafting brands for organizations and then checking in on them a couple years later and wanting to put my hands over my eyes. In general, I do a lot of this. So I'm going to come back to Common Cause because I do so much work with them, and we have a lot of sub brands. What we try to do is always make sure that the logo is on there, but we don't feel like we always have to use the brand colors. So we'll use the logo in white, and then if it's a campaign, that is particular to that campaign, we will use those particular campaign colors. But as long as the actual identifying mark is there, I think that's enough. But I also, if you look at that Planned Parenthood, that's a really good example of where you can have your C3 and your C4 have very unique design elements, but the same pieces inside, right? So the Planned Parenthood logo is the same no matter what. But when I see blue, I know that it's healthcare. When I see pink, I know it's the Action Fund.
That is the last of your questions. Thank you so much for an excellent session. This was incredibly insightful and helpful. So on behalf of the Nonprofit Help Desk, thank you, Kirsten. Thank you everyone for joining us today. You're going to get an email with a survey to give us some feedback about this session and what else you want to learn about. Don't forget, we have a series of discretionary funding workshops coming up over the next few weeks. If you are interested in discretionary funding, receiving discretionary funding, it's a great place to learn more. We also have workshops about nonprofit excellence and grant writing coming up as well. Visit us at nphd.org to find out more. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.